Well, congratulations is in order for former co-host on the Joe Budden podcast, Rory and Mal. We all remember how that situation played out publicly earlier this year. To make a long story a lot less long, it looks like the business within the Joe Budden podcast was not transparent to Rory and Mal. And when that was questioned, it looked like Joe Budden kind of spazzed out on his partners. Again, Joe wanted Rory to take a break from the podcast and for them to revisit that conversation at another time. Mal felt like his loyalty was to Rory and the podcast as a whole. And at that point in time, the three, alongside Parks, got back together, tried to make that bad boy work. It did not work out. They parted ways. Rory and Mal, since then, have did their own thing on various platforms like YouTube. Obviously, Joe and the Joe Budden podcast has moved on with new co-hosts like Ice and Ish. So everybody's went their separate ways. Well, today, Mal and Rory start a new chapter in their life as it was announced via Vulture that they have inked a new deal. Ladies and gentlemen, they have signed with SiriusXM Stitcher, and the show will now be released through Stitcher's new More Sauce label starting November 2nd with 2 episodes every Tuesday and Friday. Please let me know in the comment box below. If you're still listening to Rory and Mal, what do you think about the content that they've been putting out in the atmosphere? I wanted to read a little bit of this Vulture article, though, that was done with Rory and Mal and catch up with them if you have not been tuning into their podcast. Some interesting quotes came out of it. One of them being, when they were asked about Joe Budden threatening them, because Joe did say that on the podcast, that he was going to, pretty much sue them for the way that they handled their business and not finishing their contract. Mal said, yeah, no, it's not an issue for us. That's something you would probably have to ask Joe, but it would be very funny and a lot would be exposed if he decided to do that. Rory said that's not a route he would want to go. I can assure you that. Being independent versus signing a deal, and why did they choose to sign a deal? Mal said, we're not against being independent. Sure, we signed a deal, but again, it just made sense. They understand what we're trying to do and what we represent and how important it is for us. Rory said, I think the whole world saw what Mal and I stood for and where our heads were as far as what we were going to tolerate and not tolerate. We weren't just going to do a deal just to do a deal. We publicly turned down more money than most podcasters have ever dreamed to see. So we're not doing something unless it's a deal that is fair. When asked about the ownership, obviously that was a big thing with the Joe podcast, that they did not have any ownership in that podcast. They, according to Rory and Mal, have ownership in their new situation with SiriusXM. Mal said absolutely they have ownership, and Rory said we have 100% ownership of their show. And then here's where it gets interesting. When asked had either of them spoken to Joe Budden since the summer when all this took place, Rory said he's ran into him a couple times. I think there's like a big picture floating around, a pretty funny one with Rory sitting in the corner while Joe looks to be enjoying the party. Mal said he hadn't spoken or seen Joe since his last day at the studio, and he said he's happy that it went that way because if he had seen him or run into him, it would have been bad news, right? Let's take that a little further. Mal, when asked further about just how the Joe Budden podcast situation played out, Mal said, speaking for myself, I've totally moved on in regard to that. I don't even think about it. When Rory and I stand for now, looking back, it was the best thing that happened. I don't have any reservations or hard feelings towards anybody. I did at first. I was in a very, very different mindset on a few months ago. We just didn't know what was going on. But as time went on, Rory and I got a lot of answers to the questions we had. And character is character, right? If somebody is a certain way with other people, you can only expect them to be that way with you. You know what I mean? Like maybe it's just not your turn yet. Maybe that person hasn't been that way with you yet, but your time is coming. That was a hard pill to swallow at first, especially since we thought it was a real friendship for so many years. But again, character is character. Obviously with some comments as harsh as those that Mal, as damning as they could be to, Joe Budden, his podcast, the business dealings, you're going to get a response out of Joe. He's a public figure trying to run a network. He went on his Insta story and said, they'll question your character once you stop taking care of them, which is obviously a response to Rory and Mal's Vulture article. Again, Rory and Mal's first episode in their new situation with SiriusXM is November 2nd. Y'all let me know. Will you be tuning in? Have you been still tuning in to Rory and Mal's platform? Do you still tune in to Joe's platform? I would love to know your comments on this one. in the comment box below. I'm out.